Hello all, I'm Carrie and welcome back to my channel. I love hats. I love every kind of hat.
I love cats.
And hats.
I love every kind of hat.
And hats. I love seeing all of the gorgeous Regency hats in the 2020 version of Emma. And when I heard everyone talking about a Regency historical romance on Netflix, I eagerly watched it and was a tad disappointed at the lack of hats on the principal characters. Okay, I was horrified. I know it was a design choice and it's historical fantasy, but I feel what I feel. Hats were essential day wear for Regency women of all classes in an era without sunscreen. The 1811 etiquette book, Mirror of the Graces, admonishes young ladies, young and old, to essentially wear a bleeping hat or they will suffer the consequences. Quote, "Before this happens, it would be well for her to remember that it is wiser to throw a veil over her yet unimpaired charms than to hold them in the light till they are seen to decay," unquote. And she blames the decay, quote, "on the habit ladies have of exposing themselves unveiled and frequently without bonnets in the open air," unquote. The fact that the author felt the need to state this rule makes me think many young women were like me in my 20s when I consistently went out for a run in the middle of the day without a hat or even sunscreen on, and now I regret my choices. Also, ladies' hats from Jane Austen's lifetime were just glorious with diverse styles and decoration. I mean, they are so cute.
I think this is super cute. Wait, is it cute?
Unlike today, when you can buy a gorgeously decorated historical bonnet from a modern milliner like Shocking Bad Hats, Jane and her sister would have bought unadorned or simply trimmed hats and then made them their own with their personal choice of decorations. As Lydia Bennet says in Pride and Prejudice, "Look here, I have bought this bonnet. I do not think it very pretty, but I thought I might as well buy it as not. I shall pull it to pieces as soon as I get home and see if I can make it up any better." Jane constantly wrote to Cassandra about trimming hats. In the late 1790s, fruit was apparently all the rage. Flowers are very much worn, and fruit is still more the thing. Elizabeth has a bunch of strawberries, and I have seen grapes, cherries, plums, and apricots. There are likewise almonds and raisins. Raisins? Austen later writes, however, that she thinks, quote, that it is more natural to have flowers grow out of the head than fruit. The black bonnet in this 1816 fashion plate is a striking contrast to the pale pink gown and the white shawl, and Ruth Marten made the entire ensemble more intriguing by adding an alligator, which will be my next project. But this video is about my struggle in making the bonnet. The basic form was easy. I just followed the Timely Tresses Ophelia pattern, but I ignored the instructions to make sure it fit and to use fabric like silk taffeta to cover it. So let the chaos ensue. I used a medium weight buckram I bought from a friend, or I would share my source with you.
I'm sorry, so sorry.
I thought it was too flimsy for a hat, so I doubled it and used rocks as weights while trying to mark out cutting lines on the rolly stuff. If you don't already know, I am a geologist as well as a Jane Austen scholar, and both aspects of me tend to appear in all of my videos. I modified the headband piece to 1.5 times the suggested height because I thought it looked too small compared to the fashion plate. I was wrong, but we'll get to that. I stuck the pattern pieces under heavy books to flatten them, and Stinkerbell decided the books made a comfy bed. I pad stitched the top, or the tip, pieces together, thinking this would make them stronger, but I don't know if it helped, and I was procrastinating while waiting for my 21 gauge millinery wire and wire joiners to arrive, which I ordered from Etsy from Lulu Do Millinery. There are quite a few sellers when you put in these search terms if she is out of stock. I tried to avoid using pins where possible and mostly use 1/4 inch blue painter's tape to hold pieces together for stitching. This is a blanket stitch to hold the wire in place. With the headpiece attached to the tip, I had a nice drum.
Bongo solo.
I felt like I was making amazing progress as I quickly stitched wire to the inner and outer edges of the brim, taped it to the tip, taped it to the crown, and then sewed it together. I did not have a curved needle because I thought I knew better. I eventually made a curved needle because I did not know better. I tried the finished form on and realized it was just a little too Mad Hatter, which might make a cool cosplay later on. Okay, no problem, I can fix that. I marked where I wanted the brim to actually be on the headpiece, cut it right below that, attached a new wire, and re-sewed it to the brim. Problem solved. I'd read in other patterns that you can use cotton flannel or other fabric to mull it to prevent the rougher buckram from creating small bumps and unwanted textures in the fashion fabric. The silk I have is so preposterously thin and slippery that I pulled out some cheap flannel I originally bought 15 years ago for SCA clothing and mulled the entire outside of the hat. At first I thought I would fold the flannel under at the edges, but it is too bulky, so I cut it flush with the edges of the tip, headpiece, or crown, and brim. I effectively pad stitched the brim while doing this. Bonus. Here I abandoned the order of operations in the pattern and went by instinct. My black silk is so unruly.
A big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
I don't know that using any method on this silk would have been less time consuming or frustrating. I pinned the black tip on and sewed it down, then thought I should do the brim facing. My reasoning was that I did not want to put in brim facing stitches after sewing the black silk on the outside of the brim because how could I hide those stitches? Well, trim, but I didn't think of that at the time. Another friend sent me some scraps of pink silk and I pieced it for the facing. Piecing is period, people, and environmentally conscious because you use up more fabric. Bonnets often had pink or other light colored linings, even with dark colored hats to flatter the face, and my face tends to like pink. This silk is a lot thicker, so I did not need to mull the facing, and Susan helped me sew it on. The headpiece lining is from a short rectangle of ivory silk I got as swag at a geology conference of all places. I just cut off the Geological Survey logo, sewed it together at the narrow end, created a channel along one longer end, strung some cotton yarn through it, tightened that up, then folded the lower edge under and sewed it to the inner brim edge to attach it. Then I stitched on the black top of the brim, folding under both black and the pink fabric at the outer edge and whip stitching them together. It is very lumpy and I'll fix that later with bias binding. Next it was time for the black silk to cover the crown. All of the black silk was cut on the bias as per the pattern's instructions, and now I'm wondering if this would have been easier if I'd cut it on the straight. I mean, it's super wiggly even on the straight of grain. Anyway, I spent an hour, yes, an hour, trying to get the headpiece silk to lay flat. I couldn't do it because the silk seemed to stretch in 5 dimensions, including time, but my brain kept thinking I could force it to do my will. I stitched it down anyway, hated the way the lumpiness looked, then cut a rectangle on the straight and just folded it under at the edges and stitched it over the mess. Instead of bias binding, I made strips of the black silk on the straight of grain, and it's so flexible it worked fine. And the brim edge looks so much better with the binding. I made piping with strips of the pink silk because I originally thought I'd sew it to strips of the black silk to make trim, but I wanted nothing more to do with that silk. So I took 3-inch wide black rayon ribbon that I bought with my millinery supplies to reach the amount for free shipping because I'm always a sucker for that, and cut it in half lengthwise, then sewed piping to each edge and folded them under. I had plenty for a band of trim around the crown and made them meet at the back and stitched them down because I thought I would put a bow at the back and cover it like in the fashion plate. But after making the bow with the same trim, I decided I liked it better at one side, so you can see it better from the front. I have to make it my own, so there's a join at the back and the bow is on the side. But a friend also sent me some extra flowers and I wanted to honor her generosity by adding some to the hat. And I chose these peonies, or maybe someone's take on roses. Who cares? They're pink. The hat was done, but it lilted to the trim heavy side because I did not bother to make sure it fit. So I also made little head pillows with leftover ivory silk and filled them with cabbage. Then sewed these on either side of the hat at the crown. As usual, much of the sewing and costuming is about problem solving. Yes, a lot of my problems are ones I cause myself, but I do enjoy the brain workout. To a point. I tested out my new bonnet at a socially distanced picnic with some friends in one of my costuming groups, many of whom I haven't seen since the pandemic began, and it was so sunny and nice, and my hat did not lilt to one side or blow off my head, or fall in the mud. Success! And after all that frustration, I do love it, and I no longer plan to burn it in effigy. If you enjoyed this costuming adventure and or learned something, please help me out with the YouTube algorithm and give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think, or if you have any questions or comments below. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe to my channel. I upload every Friday. Thanks for watching.